Hi everybody, so with the release of Spearhead 1944, the World War II DLC for Arma 3 coming up, or it may well be out by the time you watch this video, there's probably going to be an awful lot of people out there who are thinking about getting into this amazing game, Arma 3, but maybe you're wondering, hey, well wait a minute, this game's 10 years old, and what type of game is Arma 3? Is it actually any good compared to modern games? And of course, should you invest your hard-earned cash, but for me, more importantly, your time buying and learning to play Arma 3? So, what is Arma 3? Well, according to Bohemia Interactive, the game's publisher and developer, who also published DayZ as well, Arma 3 is a game where players can experience true combat gameplay in a massive military sandbox. But that is only scratching the surface. For me, and it's really hard to describe Arma 3 because it encompasses so much. But, I mean, it's a very serious first and third person military shooter with lots of simulation aspects. You'll hear lots of people say that Arma 3, oh, it's a mil sim, it's a complete mil sim. Well, it is, it has lots of stuff that can do that, but it doesn't mean it's inaccessible and unplayable to people who like games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. Arma 3, it includes an official vanilla single-player story campaign. In fact, it includes a few stories that you can play through kind of solo. And it has lots and lots of scenarios and challenges, again, which you can play solo if you like, where you can experience and learn the many aspects of the game. So if you can imagine, they're almost like tutorials, but they're more in depth than that. So there'll be one about infantry combat, one about combined arms combat, one about tanks, one about flying helicopters, one about flying jets, one about being a sniper, one about being a diver, that sort of stuff. So it's very, very cool, and you can work through them. Now, the multiplayer of Arma 3, I mean, this is probably the thing that drives the game and has driven the game for a long, long time over the last 10 years, does involve PvP servers, like in something like Battlefield or Call of Duty or something, where you can dive in, you can play King of the Hill and various more arcadey games like that. But if you've watched any videos about Arma 3, some of the most interesting stuff is for the communities that do PvE, where there'll be groups of people who get together and they'll then run a mission on a server, which normally involves players working cooperatively to beat enemy AI, and it might be across like a linear campaign. So it might be something like they'll get together and go, right, okay, so we need to capture this town, and that's the basic of it, and there's lots of other things that go on, and they go in and they kill the AI and they capture the town, and all sorts of other things happen. But you also have dynamic campaigns as well, which normally exist on a server, and things are changing all of the time on this whatever map they're using, and then the real players go around and capture points and do various tasks and things like that. I know I'm sounding a bit vague, and often these are a little bit complicated to describe until you actually get in them and play them, then you go, oh right, yeah, I kind of understand this. Now, all of this might not seem that special, but there's a number of things that separate Arma 3 from the competition. And the first one you could probably say is the simple size of the playable maps, the playable areas that these scenarios and campaigns actually take part on. They are absolutely huge. I mean, if you get Arma 3 and you play the single player campaign, like the introduction where you're flying in a helicopter from one base to another, you're like on this island, it's like an island in the Mediterranean, you're like, wow, this is huge, this is going on forever. And that's not even the biggest map they have. And what this gives you, these really big maps, is a real sense of immersion, because we're very used to, when we're playing campaigns, especially if you're coming from games like Call of Duty or Battlefield, is that when you're playing a mission, you'll start the mission and often you'll be in combat straight away. You might run through a wood or a forest for a little bit or drive a vehicle. But in an Arma story or Arma campaign or mission, you might be driving a vehicle for 5 minutes before you get to where you're going to be, or you might be in a helicopter ride for 10 minutes before you get where you want to be. Now, often you can skip things like this if you want to. There are ways of speeding it up. But what it gives you is this real sense of immersion. It's like, oh, you're actually in a real place. Another example of that could be say when you're playing, if you get it and you play the Prairie Fire DLC, what often happens at the end of the missions you're doing is that it all goes wrong and you've got to try and escape. So you're running through the Vietnam jungle, chased by the NVA, trying to get to a clearing so a helicopter can come and pick you up. But but it's going to take you 10 minutes to get to that clearing, 10 minutes in real time while you're being chased by the enemy, and you don't get that in other games, and that is allowed by these huge maps that the Arma 3 game engine supports. There's also lots of attention to detail and realism, especially when we come to talking about the mods, which we'll do in a minute. Lots of people are incredibly passionate, this includes the official devs and unofficial, very passionate about Arma 3 and what goes into it, and you'll kind of come across that when you actually play the game. But probably the most important thing for Arma 3 is mod support, and Arma 3 and DayZ wouldn't be where they are today without mod support. What that means is the developer and publisher behind Arma, Bohemia Interactive, actively support people who want to add to and change their game, and they've given them official ways of doing that through the workshop on Steam, which means that someone can come along and they can completely change the game if they want, if they've got the time and the resources to do so, and as long as it's not violating copyrights or breaking things or mucking around with their intellectual property, Bohemia Interactive will allow it and will actively support it as well. So there are literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of community-made mods, easy for me to say, for Arma 3. With everything from just like simple quality of life upgrades, say the fact that you can climb over a rock, or you can mantle, or you can rappel down the side of a building, through to complete game upgrades and reskins. And generally, if there's a modern military theatre that you're interested in, chances are someone's done some sort of Arma 3 mod to bring it into the game. So you've got kind of the community-made mods, of which there's probably thousands. But then you have the what's called the C DLC, or the Creator DLC, which is officially under the Bohemia Interactive umbrella. And these, I want to call them mods, but they're much more than mods. They're almost like add-ons to the game, which are created by outside developers, often modders from the community, who have come together to create something more than just a mod. This is bigger, the quality is better, and this is published officially by Bohemia Interactive and rolled into the game as well, so it becomes part of the game. So even if you don't buy the add-on, there's these things called compatibility packs, which means that if you play on a server where they use the assets from this particular add-on, you can still use them. It just means you can't play like the single player or the PvE campaigns or with that particular add-on. And for me, these are the things that have made the biggest difference to making Arma 3 incredibly special as well. Now, the ones that we've got, there's a few that include the Cold War, like the 1980s, 1990s, and obviously the Cold War going hot, where the Russians are fighting the Germans or the Americans and all that sort of stuff, which is pretty cool. Because obviously, if I haven't mentioned it already, actually, apologies, Arma 3 is set in the near future. Alright, so it's kind of like the weapons of today, but in 20 years' time. So we've got ones that are in the Cold War, and then we had the Prairie Fire DLC, which rolls back to the Vietnam War, which is absolutely amazing. And coming up, well, for me, in about a week's time, but it might be already out for you, there's the Spearhead 1944, where we're going back to World War II. And as I kind of said, for me, the Vietnam War DLC, the SOG Prairie Fire, as a solo player especially, really got me fired up for Arma 3, because there's also a mod called SOG AI, which is a squad control mod, which allows a single player, a solo player, a lone wolf player, to easily control a number of players. That you can do that in the vanilla game, but SOG AI streamlined this process and made it much better, and you can use SOG AI in the rest of the game as well, which means that you can play the campaign missions in Prairie Fire without having to play with other people. You can play them co-op, obviously, that's probably the best way to play them, but you can play them with AI, and they're amazing. I think it's like you're in a video game version of Platoon or Apocalypse Now or something like that. And I think there's definitely an argument that the Prairie Fire DLC for Arma 3 is the greatest Vietnam video game ever made. And he could also argue that the Prairie Fire add-on is better than Arma 3. Vanilla Arma 3 anyway, but that's a bit controversial. I'll leave it up to you. However, and this is why I'm in this funny situation recording this video now before Spearhead 1944 comes out, is because with the upcoming World War II DLC, the people making it have said that this is going to be it's going to be a DLC on a scale not seen before. So they're kind of saying it's going to be bigger than Prairie Fire, which is absolutely amazing. So if it is, wow, I just absolutely can't wait. So next, is Arma 3 as good as modern games? Because it came out in 2013. Probably the biggest challenge I came across is the lack of hand-holding. When you're used to coming from games like Call of Duty or Battlefield and things like that, you're used to really being shown what to do and not really being given that many options about what you can do. And so sometimes when you go into it and you're like, well, where's all the tutorials? Now, it does have tutorials. There's the virtual tutorial. There's the prologues that show you how to do everything. So you will get to know how to do it. But you do have to explore the menus a little bit and go, okay, so there's the single-player campaign. Okay, there's the challenges. There's the scenarios. But once you know the basics, the type of unique missions and situations that Arma 3 can put you in, well, often it will really amaze you. And although, yes, sometimes the graphics look really dated, it looks like an Xbox 360 game. At other times, it looks as good as, if not better, than modern games. And for me, I kind of have minimum standards that I like for my video games. I basically play a lot of third-person and first-person shooter-type games and survival games. That's kind of my bag. And I like them to look as good, basically as good as something like, Xbox 360 games would be the minimum. And then I find in that sort of situation, as long as the gameplay is immersive, the rest of it doesn't really matter. And you get that with Arma 3 as well. I'm not saying it looks like an Xbox 360 game all the time, but the action can be incredibly immersive in Arma 3, and that's what the difference is. So, should you buy Arma 3 and spend the time to learn it? Obviously, you should kind of know by now from the way I've been talking about it that I think if you've got a modern gaming PC and you enjoy first or third person military shooters, then it's a must, especially with the Vietnam Prairie Fire DLC and hopefully with the new World War II Spearhead Seed DLC as well. Of course, buy it in the sale when it's going cheap. You'll want the Ultimate Edition that includes all the add-ons, because over the years, when Arma first released in Arma 3, it didn't have everything it had today in the vanilla game. It didn't have like jets and things like that. But you get the Ultimate Edition, and it's got everything in, and at least get the Prairie Fire DLC. And if the World War II Spearhead 1944 DLC is good, then get that as well. And then you can also get the other ones as well. In fact, if I've convinced you to get Arma 3, what you want to do is probably watch my How to Get Started in Arma 3 video, which I'll put a link to in the description below this one, because I go into more details about which version of Arma you should buy and that sort of thing. So, in conclusion, then, Arma 3, it's a really special and unique game, and I think that every military shooter fan who's got access to a PC can play it. You should at least have a go. And what will probably happen is you will probably go into it and you'll probably start playing it and you'll be like, oh my god, what is this? This is so tricky to learn and play and clunky. But it will be eating away at the back of your brain and you'll come back to it. And this is what happened to me. You'll play your other games you play, and then you'll come back to Arma 3, you'll play a bit more and you go, okay, well that was alright, but not great, but I'm kind of getting it now. And you'll go away and you'll come back again and you'll go, oh, actually, I'm really enjoying this. And you go and you come back again. And then before you know it, you'll be playing these 2-3 hour play sessions when you're fighting your way across the jungles of Vietnam, or doing lots of other things and doing lots of investigation about how to play different scenarios and different things you can do, and installing and mussing around with all these different mods. So I think it's very special indeed. So there we go. I like Arma 3. I think it's really good, and I think you should give it a go. Right, that's enough from me. If you've enjoyed the video, hit like. If you want to see more of the same, press subscribe, and of course, I'll see you again soon.